Ben Smith is an editor-in-chief, the editor-in-chief of Buzzfeed News. He was game enough to join us tonight, and obviously we're grateful for that. Not his first time on the show, but I'm thankful that you came. So, Ben, let me just ask you first about the dossier. This really is a sincere question. So you published a dossier. You and I have debated whether or not that was a wise move or an ethical move, but you did. Then we learn in the testimony, and I don't think anyone would doubt it, that Cohen did not, in fact, go to Prague. Now, we only believe that he did go to Prague because you ran the story. But you never ran a follow-up story informing your readers of that. Why?
You know, that's just totally false, Tucker. Within I think, weeks of publishing the dossier, obviously we were reaching out to Cohen, and Cohen graciously allowed us to photocopy the inside of his passport. And
I remember the story.
And we published a very detailed account of his denial that he had gone to Prague, and showing every bit of evidence we could get from him.
But I know, I just read that story. Hold on, I just read that story about 20 minutes ago, so it's very fresh.
I don't totally understand why you're saying that we haven't published a story saying Cohen said he didn't go to Prague.
Let me explain.
He's been saying consistently that he didn't go to Prague.
No, I just read the story that you published. It does not say, because you didn't have evidence of the fact conclusively, that he didn't go to Prague. Last week, we have him under oath with no motive for lying, saying conclusively that he didn't go to Prague. That's one of the headlines out of those hearings. How could it not be? And yet you ignored it. Since you're the one who published the dossier in the first place, don't you have an obligation to kind of tie a bow in the story and tell us what happened in the end?
You know, I mean, I guess we don't see tying bows as our primary obligation. We did cover the hell out of that, and particularly that aspect, from sending reporters to Prague to writing Michael Cohen's repeated denials of this.
But now we know for a fact that it didn't. So in other words, if I read a story
I guess
and said,
I'm surprised that you think Cohen's latest statement makes it more of a fact than his previous statements.
I added
it certainly wasn't a new development that he denied it.
To what we
know,
that we finally get to ask Michael Cohen in public, and he has every reason to tell us that, yes, he went to Prague, and that, yes, everything you think about Trump is true, because we all hate Trump in media world. He hates Trump, too. Now he can tell us the truth. And instead he tells us the opposite, that no, he didn't go. But that's not all. The dossier also claimed that poor Carter Page, whose life has been destroyed because of the salacious nonsense in that dossier, that he received $11 billion from a Russian energy company in a deal. Now, he didn't, but I don't think BuzzFeed's ever told us that. Why not?
So we published the dossier at the time, as we talked about then, not because we had been able to stand up or knock down every allegation. In fact, we said, unverified document, and an extremely important document, public document at the heart of an FBI investigation. I actually, when we talked about this last time, I got the sense you basically agreed with that, and certainly the idea that Devin Nunes would have been able to press his case against the Mueller against the Russian investigation while saying there is this secret document, it really makes my case, but you're not allowed to see it, that you would have been able to make the arguments you've made about Christopher Steele, about these documents, and that people on the other side would have all the while saying, but this document will scald your eyes out if you look at it, so only we, the elect, we journalists, can look at it.
I get it.
That's why we published it. You understand why we published it. I don't understand why you're saying this.
I said it at the time. I think that's not a crazy argument to make that you made, and I am instinctively in favor of openness. But you're a journalist, not simply a guy who runs a platform. You're not running Medium here or Google. You're running a news site. And so you inject these claims into the public sphere, and then you don't follow up. So if I run a piece by one of your neighbors saying, Ben shot somebody, don't I kind of have an obligation when you get acquitted of the crime to write a story on that? I think I do. And you did, but you didn't. Why didn't you?
There are a lot of claims there. We've invested a lot of energy in running the ones down that we could. Some of them are very, very hard to confirm or knock down. Discussions between Vladimir Putin and his aides. Cohen's was pretty straightforward. We put a lot, and I think that's a great example.
Carter Page's. Well, but hold on. Carter Page's life was destroyed by this. He can't get a job. He's considered a Russian spy or a villain. He's never been charged with anything. And your dossier that you ran has added, I think, a lot to the perception that he is a disloyal American. We now know he didn't take $11 billion in a Russian energy company. That's untrue. And you've spent all this time trying to talk about, whatever, the Trump Tower, like who cares, in Moscow. And this guy lives with this claim against his name, and you haven't corrected it.
We've reported extensively on Carter Page, on his contact with Russian intelligence back in the day, on his denials. We've talked to him repeatedly. He was at my office at several months ago at a reception. I mean, I don't know how Carter Page feels he's been treated by us, but certainly we have carried his side of this. But it's funny that you were dismissive before of something because it's interesting. Like a lot of what I think you're exercised about, and that your audience, I think sometimes understandably, is really exercised about, is the collusion story and the sometimes totally wild allegations about collusion. The Tower story, the story that you mentioned, the story that Michael Cohen is going to jail about lying about, the story that you feel Cohen I think you and I probably disagree on exactly what Cohen said about it. It is not a collusion story. It's a real estate story. It is a great real estate story. That Donald Trump.
I'm aware of that. No. And
can I just tell the story to your audience here that we're talking about? This is the story
we don't
at
have
the
enough
heart
time.
of this whole thing.
I want to get to.
You spent a lot of time talking about cats. Can I just talk for 2 minutes about the Trump Tower Moscow?
Then I want to get to the specific claim that I made in my open, which I know you're going to want to respond to. That here you have Cohen and the Mueller investigation both debunking the so-called bombshell that you ran in January, and you're refusing to admit it has been debunked. When I just played 2 pieces of tape, Michael Cohen saying essentially what BuzzFeed said is not true, but you're claiming it is still true. On what grounds?
I mean, if this was my show, I would have extended both of those clips a little longer. The first to show Michael Cohen saying, in his way, he was telling me to lie, which I just don't think there's a lot of dispute now that Cohen is saying that he claims, you could say he was lying, you don't have to believe Michael Cohen, he claims, he believes Trump was telling him to lie. Now, when when this first went out, you guys were calling it a hoax. You were saying the central thesis was wrong.
That's not what your piece said. Your
piece said he was directed to lie.
He personally instructed him. He explicitly told him to lie.
Personally instructed him. Cohen described a meeting in person
you said he
between the people.
explicitly told him to lie.
Let me take them one at a time.
Okay.
Cohen described a personal meeting with Jay Sekulow and Trump, in which, in discussing his testimony, and this is something where everyone is chasing to get more detail of this, and it's a little hard for us to argue about it in the absence of like a transcript of the meeting. This isn't Nixon. We don't have audio. The things that Trump said that you said before were no Russia, no deal. I mean, if that is in the context of his testimony, that is certainly personal. They're talking to each other about his testimony. Is it explicit? I think that's a reasonable argument reasonable people can have. But the idea that this has been debunked, this is a hoax, I mean, the whole story has moved to a place where we're having a much narrower dispute here, Tucker. By the way, about a story that is not about collusion, about a story that is about lying about an amazing real estate deal in Moscow.
Look, I want to say, just once again, to be totally clear, I genuinely respect your coming on to defend your reporting. Most people won't, you will. And I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. But it's the details that matter in life as in news stories.
Absolutely.
And your story said, and I'm again quoting it, he explicitly told Cohen to lie. Cohen was asked twice by 2 separate Democratic members of Congress if that was true. He had every reason to say it was true, but he said it was untrue. So why not just say, maybe parts of our story were right, but we got over our skis, we went too far, we made a claim we can't back up, and the subject of the allegation now denies, and we admit it. Why not just say that?
See, I guess I think, as Jason said recently, that the bar now seems to be, did he say, Michael, I now instruct you to lie, and that anything short of that
But that's what your piece says. But your piece claims that. It says that he explicitly asked
what
him
Trump
to lie.
told him was, in the context of his testimony, no Russia, no deal. Again, the details of that exchange matter a lot. Exactly where he said that, exactly how he said that, matters a lot. But I think the question of whether Trump, is directing and ordering people and how he's talking about it is something everybody's kind of wrestling with right now. You saw the New York Times report that he had ordered Kelly to do something, but that they didn't know the exact words. And I do think at some point Michael Cohen, who is his trusted retainer, has worked for him for a long time, it is not, to me, totally crazy that he should be expected to be able to interpret his boss's words.
Okay. All right. Well, in any case, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for having me,
And
Tucker.
the door's always open to you and anyone else. Appreciate it.